I'm Jeremy Springer. I am the Director of MEP Technical Services with ATG. A little bit of background on myself. Been in the MEP universe heavily for about 35 years. Been in varied positions where I have been directly hiring and firing employees, right? So I have some unique insights in that regard and some of the struggles that are associated with it. So that's a little bit about me.
I'll go next. I'm Olivia. I'm one of the corporate recruiters with ATG, but I specifically focus on the technical positions. So I work directly with Jeremy. He's one of my hiring managers, and I hire for that team, as well as civil, reality capture, architecture, tech support, construction. I've been at ATG for about 6 months. Before that, I was doing healthcare recruiting at a recruiting staffing firm. And then before that, I was actually in the AEC industry as a civil engineer in training at a land development firm. And before that, I graduated from UT Austin with a civil engineering degree. So I have a little bit of knowledge on both sides. So yeah.
You do a fantastic job, by the way. I want to point that out.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. My name is Paul Bunda. I'm from a company called Recruiting Toolbox. So I am not an expert in the AEC industry. My connection to the industry is through one of our clients, Autodesk, who many of you know very well. And so my perspective here is purely from a talent acquisition perspective, maybe a broader HR perspective. I have been in this space now in recruitment for 20 years, a couple decades, as well as including the last 5 years with Recruiting Toolbox. So I'm excited to be part of this conversation today.
Love it. So I want to start out this conversation, right? There's a town hall. And the biggest thing that I want to start with, and I don't want to do death by PowerPoint, but I do want to show you some statistics, right? When we're talking about retention and recruiting, and those two are intimately tied to one another. What I mean by that is that the reason a recruiter is able to take somebody from you is that you may not have addressed those very topics that are their reasons for leaving, right? So retention, recruitment, they really are two sides of the same cloth, right? It's really important. So, analysis of exit interviews, right? One of the biggest points, and I want to bring up a few slides, just 4 of them, but talk about, reasons people are leaving. An exit interview is very vital. It gives you valuable insight, right, into why people are leaving the organization, right? A lot of people are like, oh, forget it, let them go, right? They quit, who cares? They're gone. It's actually really, really important. So I want to talk about, the industry as a whole, right? We're not talking any specific, but the United States, the job market as a whole. So I'll share my screen really quick, and I will show you what we have got here. And there we go. Okay. I assume you guys can see me okay?
Yep. Okay,
perfect. So job search plans, right? We're talking about why people, want to leave, or the fact how many of them want to leave, right? We're talking 46% of those workers that are in the industry plan to look for a new job in the next 6 months. That's concerning. That's a big deal. Okay. Again, talking about reasons for making the move, their salary issues, benefits, the perks that are associated with that job, as well as work flexibility. A lot of the stuff post-pandemic is directly related to, working from home and not having to be exposed, right? It's scary. So, another thing I want to point out, second slide here, is the job search plans over time. 2 years ago, let's say, back in 2021, it was around 32% of the market wanted to go. Now we're at 46%. That's almost a 50% growth in the last 2 years. Kind of eye-opening in that regard, right? Additionally, job search plans by demographic. Let's talk about the demographics of those who are looking to leave. Talking about age of the employees, the 25 to 40-year-old range, which is a large portion of the job market, let's be clear, have intentions. They're the highest demographic, right, of the age groups. In tenure, 2 to 9 years, that's the largest demographic. Those are people that you have invested a lot of time and energy into, right? That's concerning. And then, of course, us, AEC industry, right? We're talking about something that's specific to us. 52%. That's the highest, practice area demographic as well. Scary. The other thing that a lot of people think about is, does this affect me? Right? Is this something, oh, my neck of the woods, we don't have that problem because our economy is different than everybody else. Well, if you look at this job search plan by city, okay, it shows you every corner of the country and all the stuff in the middle. It's about the same, unless you're in Houston. Apparently, they really want to quit their job. I don't know.
Yeah, oil and gas.
Yeah. Down in Houston, apparently they don't want to work. Just kidding. Anyway, the point being is that those are really disturbing demographics, right? And the last thing I guess I want to bring up initially is the demographics of the individuals who are the reasons they're giving for leaving, right? You guys go ahead and carry on for a second.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that I think those statistics are very true.
Mhm.
And I think that, instead of people progressing up in a company and getting promoted and stuff, they usually just jump to get their promotions and like pay increases and things like that. And they don't really care that much about tenure as much anymore, more just about kind of hopping and getting those
Right.
things instead of, waiting for your turn.
Yeah, I think, from a recruiting perspective, I started to see a lot of the winds change maybe about 20 years ago, where you
Mhm.
started to hear, different organizations talking about how, hey, tenure, you're lucky if you get someone who's around for 2 or 3 years. That was sort of the free agent
Right.
economy was the buzzword a couple decades ago. And that has borne out to be true over time, and increasingly so, where the sense of loyalty to organizations, like our parents or our parents' parents back in the day, you work for the one company, the mill in town or whatever it might be, and you're there for your entire career.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. And the other point I think is important for us to realize, although many of us don't want to, perhaps we're tired of talking about the pandemic. That context is important in the data that Jeremy is showing and the other data that we're seeing. The fact that people are saying, look, we are reevaluating our relationship with our employer. We are reevaluating what our work-life balance looks like. In fact, a lot of the numbers there talk about work-life balance being a big motivator to either leave or join a new company. And so people are sort of saying, look, I know how fragile life is. I know how difficult life is, and there's got to be a different way. And I've heard that. I talk to thousands and thousands of folks every year and ask them what makes them tick, right? What makes them join companies? What makes them leave companies? And these inevitably have floated to the top over the last few years, for sure.
Yeah, you talk about the pandemic, right? Everybody calls it the great, resignation or whatever,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
we've seen, what was it? I think upwards of 4.1 million employees have left the job market. That's a big deal, right? That's monstrous numbers, and that's scary as far as being able to get people in the first place, but also, retaining them also has a major factor in that. Obviously, they left, and that's a retention issue.
Yeah.
Stuff that you want to talk about retention strategies. Will they directly address the reasons that they are heartburn and they're leaving in the first place, right? So, I'd like to list off just kind of a top 10 of some retention strategies that you can utilize within your organization to keep those people with you. And to honestly, no offense, guys, you're recruiters, but to keep the recruiters from stealing your people, right? Number one is, your onboarding and orientation strategy, right? Let's talk about that. That's your first impression with these employees, right? When they come to work for you, you're establishing that relationship. So that one to me is a big one, right? Making sure that when they come on board with you, that they feel like they've made the right choice, that this is a great organization that they've joined, right? That's retaining your people. When they first come in, you want to put your best foot forward and show them, hey, this is what we're about, right? Number two, what I would call is, a cross training or mentorship programs. People want to develop their skills. They want to advance within the organization, and they want to know that there's not this necessarily like a ceiling early on in the game, or they're going to feel stagnated, right? So that's a big one. What I see number 3, of course, is employee compensation, but it's so much more than just pay, right? We're talking compensation, not just pay. Of course, you got to be competitive in the market, but you couple that with the fact that they have job satisfaction. You're offering them these perks, right? Which is number 4. The perks that you offer your employees as an organization are going to keep them there, right? We're talking ancillary benefits, if you got a 401k, additionally,
PTO.
working from home as an option, right? That's a big deal, right? If they can do that, especially post-pandemic, that ties into that pandemic discussion, right? PTO flexibility, not guilt tripping them about taking a couple of days off, right? There's organizations that's very much frowned on, and they can say they don't do it, but they really do, right? And we've all probably been subject to that at one point in our careers. Wellness offerings, investing in your employees again, right? We're talking about giving them that little extra. That's a perk, right? Communication. One thing that is said a lot, and I'm sure, Paul and Olivia, you guys can, attest to this as well. When people are looking to leave, one of their reasons is that they're quitting their boss, their manager, or their direct report was not somebody that they had a lot of faith in. Varied reasons for that, but they're not happy with the way things are being run and how they're being managed. Right. So good communication, setting expectations upfront contracts is what I've always called that. Right. Saying this is the expectation, we measure to that, as far as our expectation goes. Number 8, training and development. Let's talk about that. They want to advance their career again. We'll talk, give them an opportunity to say, hey, you have personal goals. We have company goals. They may align, or if not, let's find a creative way to make those align. Number 1 is work-life balance. We talked about working from home, right? And flexible work arrangements, again, tying to those perks, but that's a part of that, right? Working from home or flexible hours. If somebody has to take time off, use their PTO because they have a dental appointment, you don't want to beat them up over that stuff, right? Super important. Also emphasis on teamwork, making sure that everybody feels like they're a part of the big picture. Everybody wants to be a part of something bigger. And that's a great point, Israel, by the way. Investment in technology, new
Definitely.
college graduates, love that statement. These are perks, and this is showing these employees that you care, that they matter, and recognition of that, right? Recognition and reward systems, not only for the employee, but also milestones and whether they're big or small. You can say, hey, you know what? We sold X number of revenue in this month. Woohoo! We're going to have ourselves a potluck next month to celebrate. I don't know. Create your own creative options, but things like that matter. That's culture, right? So those were the 10 of the items that I see. And again, Paul and Olivia, you guys have intimate insight on these recruitment tactics. Would love to hear your thoughts on them.
I definitely think one of the most important ones specifically to me, and I think to a lot of people as well, is the relationship with your direct report. I think that's the most important. That is the reason that I left the AEC industry, like as a civil engineering intern, just because my boss and I did not see eye to eye. I wasn't given the energy that the other people were. Wasn't given the time, my questions were not answered and were frankly laughed at by him. So that's why I left the AEC industry altogether. And I think that is like the most important thing.
Absolutely.
And
for
I
women
would echo that.
specifically.
Yeah. Olivia, that's a great point. And I think that goes for, gratefully over my career, I've had a chance to work in just all kinds of industries. And that adage holds true, or that truth is true across all the different industries. Number one reason oftentimes people make that decision to join a company, amongst all the others, are, I feel like I'm going to be supported by my boss or my manager. The number one reason they leave is because they feel like they're not supported by their boss or by that manager. So that all just sort of rolls up into what Olivia's saying and what Jeremy, listed out with those 10 things for sure.
Yeah, you just want to be heard,
Yeah, you got to give people opportunity. I know myself, an example, as I was coming up through the ranks, as a pup, so to speak. And, I get bored easy. I don't know how else to put it, right? If I'm doing a job and hey, I want to set my goals for there. And that's one strategy that I always implemented, of course, is actually doing the performance reviews of people they want to know where they stand within the organization, right? They want to understand the dynamic that they, are contributing to. They want to say, hey, do I make a difference? And that's so important during, any sort of, tenure with an employee, right? That 2 to 9 years. I guarantee you, if
Yeah.
you were to look at it, their performance reviews may have been lax or not even done at all. And I like to talk to them about their personal goals during that as well. Right. I don't want to ask them, hey, can you guys contribute to my organization's goals? I want to say, what are your goals and how can we meld both of those together to come up with a common, game plan? What's the strategy for the next year? Yep.
Yeah, and I think working remote too, I think that makes it even more important to have those performance reviews, because it's sometimes hard to know where you stand when you're not having that face-to-face interaction all the time. So I definitely think that makes it even more important if you have remote employees as well.
Yeah. And let's talk also about buy-in from these employees, right? Collaborative effort, that makes them feel like they're a part of the big picture as well, right?
Yeah.
If I'm trying to come up with a new strategy, we're moving forward in our division, we're going to do this. What do you guys think? You know what I mean? And if they
Yeah.
had a hand in that collaborative conversation, what they're going to do is they're going to totally put both feet in. They're going to put that much more investment of energy to make sure it's successful, right? Or hopefully they do.
For sure.
Yeah.
So there was another study. And if I'm taking us in too much of a different direction, please stop me, Jemry and Olivia. There was another
No.
study that I came across by a provider of HR technology, right? So they have access to companies across industries, different sizes, et cetera, et cetera. And they talked about the fact that amongst the top 5 or 6 reasons why people leave, right, in the first place. And the reason that we talk about leaving as well as what you do to retain is because they're often connected, right, folks?
Absolutely.
And Olivia started to make the point about flexibility to work from home, right? And that was in the top 5. That was 20% of the folks saying, "Look, we're talking about wanting to move on because we don't have that flexibility," right? And that same study kind of pointed to some really interesting data that I thought I'd share around that. It was specifically questions around remote work. And they said, look, here's 3,000 employees and employers. And of them, the employers were saying, 83% of them said, hey, we want to make sure that we have people in the office at least 3 times a week. We need that face time. So,
Yeah.
okay, reasonable. I mean, that's something
value there.
you'd expect to
Yeah.
hear that. Here's the interesting part. For 20% of the employees, only 20% said they were willing to do that, three days or more, right? 40% of them said, I don't even want to go in at all anymore. I've seen the light, so to speak, and I know. And then when those
Yeah.
employers were asked
Burnout,
further,
right? Yeah.
well, what have you seen in actual productivity? 54% of those employers who were saying we want people to come into the office 3 times more still said, hey, we actually see an increase or at minimum, no difference in productivity. So
Right.
they were coming up with other reasons than better productivity.
Right.
So the interpretation by this study was maybe it's all about control and we need to just have a different framing. So
Yeah.
this kind of goes back to the culture that you build in your team, the way you
Right.
communicate and interact with your folks, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. right?
Yeah, I have a list too of when you do exit interviews, there's a survey done and they basically listed out the top reasons people leave, right?
Right.
Why are they quitting, right? And it's funny because you can see the correlation between the list I gave before, the top 10 of how you keep people, inadequate salary, right? These are almost the same list. Benefits, right? People want good insurance or the ancillary benefits. They feel overworked or undersupported. That
Yeah.
was number 3, right? They don't feel like their management team is really supporting them the way it should. And I've seen that on several occasions, right? I love that term, the great realization, by the way.
I know, I was laughing at
Yeah.
that.
Oh, that's
Very
awesome. Yeah, that's a
Really
great term, by the way. Limited career advancement, right? We were just talking about that. People want to feel like they can go places, right? That they have room for growth, work-life balance, working from home. You were just talking about that, right? That gives them, the ability to handle their personal lives as well, and it offers them flexibility. Lack of recognition, that's a big one. And I'm real big on that with my employees, right? hey, you know what, you did a fantastic job in actually calling it out in a group environment. You know, the one-on-one's great. But okay, I see there was a question from an attendee. What options are typical for employees sorry,
Who want to move into a semi-retired position?
I'm not
you
familiar
know,
with
that's a tough
Hmm.
one. It depends on the organization, right? You're looking at, you know, employees that maybe, yeah, again, that whole work from home thing, you know, the demands of the organization, the industry I'm currently in, it doesn't offer a lot for that, you know, to be
Right.
completely frank. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Limited career advancement, right? That's a big deal. And that's one of the points I'm bringing up, right? Moving on, boredom or lack of engagement, right? People get into that humdrum burnout as well as another one where they feel like they're just going to the same place, cookie cutter. Oh my God, you know, and that Dunkin' Donuts commercial where the guy be like, I just made the donuts, right? Management concerns, that's a big one.
What does a semi-retired position look like? I've never heard of that.
I've dealt with it. I've actually had an employee, a couple of them that are that, and what that is that they're part-time essentially,
Oh,
right?
okay.
You know, they're semi-retired. I've had it to where I had an inside salesperson at an MEP organization out in Denver where I was the ops manager there, and it worked. It's nice, especially if you have a scenario where that individual has a high-level skill set that can be valuable
Mhm.
in certain scenarios, but it has to fit with the organization's business plan, right? You can't
Did
go
you just
hiring
split
people
the
just
job into
because you
two?
feel.
Sorry to interrupt there.
No. I didn't have the demand for it either. So what I have is I hire somebody maybe to fill that position,
Mhm.
right? When they go or they retire. And then I keep that person on the roster. We had the room. They were running pretty hard anyway, so I had the bandwidth to absorb that. But
Okay.
the nice thing is that they offer valuable insights to the new employees. You know, they bring experience, right? You know,
Sure.
that's a scary thing when they leave. So that's not a bad plan, but you have to really, really think it out before you jump down that rabbit hole because it can be a challenge as far as getting things accomplished too. Is that fair?
Yeah, that helps.
Another thing is concerns with company's direction or financial health. I've been victim of that. Okay. I quit a company because I was really concerned with their financial decisions they were making. That's the truth.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have to, you know, be an open book in some aspects, right? Not specifics, but help them understand that, you know, this is the direction. That's a change management thing. Saying, look, this is the direction we're going, and this is what we're doing to get there, and this is why we're doing it, right? Explain that stuff. Don't be afraid to explain your reasoning as a business while you're doing things like that. Bad culture, you know, who hasn't been at a place where everybody's the negative Nelly or there's just this dark cloud, you know, it's like, you know, the kid off of Charlie Brown, you know, that's bad. And people don't want to go to work at that point, right? That's bad. Desire to make a change. They will just want, again, advancement. They want to see what's out there. And then the other company offers enticing or exciting job opportunities. Those are the top reasons why people quit an organization. And that's interesting because if you look at the top 10, they directly address those things as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So Jose weighed in here with, you know, saying limited career advancement. We called that out earlier, but I'm curious to hear why other people have left if they're not, you know, if they're not captured in the list that we just discussed, you know, the last few minutes, Jeremy and
Yeah.
Olivia. Feel free to weigh in the chat, folks. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah. Love the interaction that you guys have given so far. Would love to see more, I guess.
Yeah,
Is what
why else have you left your previous employers?
You know, turnover, again, we can kind of dig into that here a little bit about turnover. I know, Paul, you had some interesting data, you and Olivia both on
Yeah.
turnover and the costs, right?
Mhm.
Turnover is a big deal, and that's exit interviews to understand why, so you can control that and mitigate that cost, hopefully.
Yeah, so I have sorry, I have some stats that I found from Vector Solutions. I think they're probably like a recruiting firm or something for the AEC industry. But some of the statistics that they shared is on average, it takes about 45 days and costs $4,000 to hire a new employee. I would say specifically with ATG, I know that not everyone on here is ATG, but we have been, you know, flying all of our new hires to Little Rock. Kind of ties into what Jeremy was saying earlier about like the first impression and just making sure the employees feel comfortable and, you know, valued right off the bat. So we have been investing, more money in that as well, flying people to Little Rock. So that would probably be even higher for us.
It makes the turnover cost high. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that would, probably up that $4,000. And then it takes about 12 weeks to get a new hire up to full productivity. So, I mean, you're losing money there, of course, if someone's not fully up to speed. 15% of newly hired employees quit within 3 months. I've definitely seen that since, being in recruiting, sometimes the job just isn't the right fit for people and you quit pretty quickly. 55% of workers are currently planning to look for a new job next year. We already kind of talked about that with the statistics at the beginning. And then only 34% of workers are engaged
that
at
one.
work.
Savannah
So-
just said something too that was pretty interesting to me, and this is one that I was big on. And,
Oh.
previously left a company for over-promising and under-delivering, broken trust. That's a big one. That's a
Yeah.
management issue, right? Let's, we talked about the major overall 30,000 foot reasons, but the reasons specifically down in the details is stuff like that, right? Hey, I'm going to get you that raise, or I'm going to get, I'm going to get you some more PTO per year, and you don't deliver on that. That's huge. And reestablishing that trust after it's broken, almost impossible, right? That's a bad road to go down. So yeah, that's tying into the turnover rates. What I'd like to know, and I'd love for Paul to share his stats here in a second, but from you guys, the impacts of turnover, right? It's not just a financial thing, but they all kind of tie to finances, right? In some form or another. Cultural. Right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's a cultural impact, right? You got your good buddy that you're working with, and they sit there and even before they go, they're complaining about how unhappy they are. That's a problem. That's a dark cloud.
Yeah,
The whole bad apple spoils the bunch, right?
yeah, it does.
Productivity. Are they laying down on you before they quit? Or the other guy is so unhappy that person quit, right? That they're just like, you know what, I've had it. Who hasn't been
Yeah.
to some extent that, right?
Yeah, I think it definitely shatters trust a little bit when someone, like one of your best friends at work, quits. Because then it's like, well, why did they quit? Should I be looking for a new job too? Are they getting something that's better than this one? So I think it just kind of makes everyone lose trust on the team.
Saw a question from Andrea too, and I'm trying to field these as well, so apologies, I take a second.
No, it's okay.
Andrea Alderton had said, we have a lot of interns that turn into full-time employees. They then leave a few years in for greener grass, which we and they have learned it's not greener. That's a beautiful statement, by the way. One company is going to have, everybody has their struggles. Let's be clear. No matter where you're at, you're going to have problems of some sort or another, the struggle, the things that you may or may not like, or the nuances that drive you crazy. Boils down to is you can leave here to go there, and you're going to find out that there's things that you didn't like about here that you like there, and things that you didn't like there that you did like here, right? That whole green grass is green on the other side typically is a false promise, right? So, okay, and Paul, you had some turnover data.
I just
What
dropped
are you
them in the
talking
chat as the conversation was going on, so everyone can, if you open chat, you can see it there. This is from 2021 U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, so we haven't seen the 2022 slice yet. Average turnover rate across all industries 47.2%, right? So another way to look at it is within the first 90 days, 47.2% of your folks are likely to leave. In the construction industry, and I know we're talking more broadly AEC, but the way they slice it on the data is construction is 56.9%, so even higher than average. And I'm sure Olivia and Jeremy, you're probably feeling the very real effects. I mean,
Oh,
you're
man.
experiencing that on your end. And the other piece of data, real quick, sorry, Jeremy, the other piece of data is right there, is just when you think about turnover and cost, right? Fully load that, because the time that it takes to hire somebody new, right? And then you got lost productivity and everything else. And then you got to train that person up again. You're typically looking at 1.5 to 2 times salary of the person that you're replacing in order to, so that's why all this emphasis on the retention pieces. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No. That's a beautiful point, right? And we were talking about cost of turnover now, right? And that's the biggest thing, is that it actually has a real effect, right? You invest all this time and this energy, other employees not doing what they would normally have done, right?
Yeah.
All of these things matter. And Jose made a point, the false promises is probably right up there at the top of that list of worst things you can do to an employee. So as a manager, as a direct report, as a recruiter even, and I know Paul and Olivia would state the same, that when you make those promises, you have to deliver on those. And what that looks like, it can be something where you have a candid conversation saying, look, I can't deliver that this week, but next week I got you, right? Things
Mhm.
like that. But open and candid, these people you're dealing with people, not a monkey wrench, right? You're dealing with people and their emotions and the way they provide for their families. So it's a big deal. And as a manager, you do have a huge responsibility to them, right? And that's something that you cannot lose sight of, right? I want to circle back real quick too, because Andrea had asked at the end of that, and I apologize.
Yeah.
How would we address the whole people leaving for the greener grass to help retain those younger employees with a huge investment, right? First off, what is the benefit of
What's
keeping
the
them?
greener? Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Find
What
out
is
from them
greener?
why. Yeah.
The exit interview is detrimental for that. Two things. When they come to you and they give you a 2-week notice or whatever the case might be, first thing I say is it's kind of like a pre-exit interview. Why? You have the right to ask why. What are you upset? What's making you want to go that direction? And you can address those things. And ideally, you have a solid employee retention program in place, right? All these things are going to entice them to leave. So you've at least put some energy into every one of these retention items, ideally, right? And if not, maybe it's time to go ahead and start. So I think the way that you address and retain them is by saying, what is the problem? And how can we deliver on that? I have talked employees from giving a 2-week notice out just simply because they wanted more opportunity, they wanted more training. Well, you know what? Right now, while I have you sitting here, I'm going to sign you up for some training.
Let's do some
If it's
training.
that easy, why not? Right? You know what I mean? There are a lot of steps you can take to do that. And you know what? You don't want to be manipulated or whatever. But at the same time, if they're a good employee and they're worth putting that time and energy and you want to keep them, far be it from any of us to not entertain them.
Yeah. If I could just add on to that, to Andrea's question there. First of all, a big encouragement to make sure that you're pulsing your employees as frequently as possible, right? So if it's you got a lot of interns, your entire employee population, actually, what are you doing on a regular basis to actually understand their voice and what motivates them and where their opportunities are? And you can kind of go back to some of the data that Jeremy, presented early on in terms of the reasons why people leave, and compensation is obviously one that's always going to be top of the list. And it's certainly been the case in the data these last couple of years. But above and beyond that, Jeremy mentioned growth opportunities and development. I think wherever you are in your career, whether you're early career, mid-career, or you're a subject matter expert and you've been doing this for a while, you still want to be able to continue to learn and grow, right? That's kind of one of those truths that we see across the employee population. The other one that I think is very important is, and maybe even more so, and kind of speaks a little bit to what Israel said about multi-generational workforce, is the notion of finding meaning and having impact in your job. Right. That's another big reason why people leave or why people are attracted to organizations. So I guess to bring that all back around, Andrea, pulse the folks, find out really what they want and what they need, see what you can do to help create those opportunities, like Jeremy's example of providing training. That's really the best thing that we have to be able to sort of combat people bleeding out the back end, so to speak.
And at the same time, too, Paul, they got, if you have one employee that has that particular concern, whatever that concern is that you've discerned, probably others that maybe feel the same way. Those sentiments are probably fairly common throughout the ranks, right? So even if you're not able to convince that employee to rescind their 2-week notice, you can at least anticipate what others are looking for. And you can talk to your employees, because nothing worse than a mass exodus because one employee quit and he started the fire. We're going to keep it burning, right? So go to your employees, be candid, be upfront, be open book, and say, look, it come to my attention that maybe we have a concern with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And you know what? This is what we're going to do to address them, right?
Yeah.
Go into it, talk to the ownership, leadership, whatever within your organization, and say, this is a problem. We need to address it. And that ultimately becomes just a part of your employee retention program, ultimately, right?
And that's a big reason why I say, pulse early, pulse regularly, because if you're finding
Don't
out for
wait.
the first time in the 2-week notice, it's too late.
They're gone,
Yeah.
probably. Me personally, when I would give a 2-week notice, which doesn't happen often, but it had. And when I do, I'm not doing it as a manipulation tactic. I'm doing it as a saying, I've made my mind up.
Yeah, you already made your
Somebody-
decision.
Yeah.
I
For
made
sure.
my mind up, and that's too late. So, that whole part of the retention thing of regular and performance reviews. That's a
Yeah.
great opportunity to stay in front of your employees. The other thing I used to do was I would just go around to the different, we had job sites that we were on, right? And I would go to those jobs and I would mingle with these guys and I'd have a conversation. I'm just a person and you're a person and we're doing some stuff, right? Bring it back in. These people will start to feel a drift out in the ocean, like they're all on their own. And you know what? To create that culture of inclusivity, teamwork, that we're all on the same ship and we're all going for the same goal, again, is super detrimental, especially when it comes to somebody considering giving a notice, right? They will talk to you more likely if you establish that strong bond, that relationship, that tie between yourself and those employees. In my opinion.
Can we come back to the multi-generational workforce?
I think that's a great conversation. I had a little bit on that too, Paul.
Yeah.
It's different depending on the age demographic. We were looking at that slide initially, and if
People
you look
willing to
at the
move.
age,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you got some insight on that, I think it's a great point.
Well, I'm always wary of painting with too broad a brush, right? All millennials are this, all Gen Z are this, all Gen X are this, right? So I think I can only speak from my own experience leading teams that are multi-generational. There's a lot of truth in what Israel has to say in terms of the need to get validation, right? I'm a very much right in the center Gen Xer, right? I'm totally happy if you say nothing to me, just leave me alone, just let me get stuff done, right?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of my Gen X brethren are the same way. But that's not how we're all wired. I'm a parent of two, young adults, firmly Gen Z. And if I leave them alone, then I'm the worst person in the world, right? If I'm not, so that, and I've had employees the same way. Do I have data? Nothing above and beyond what you just talked about and what we talked about earlier in terms of the willingness to move on for these younger generations, the fact that the notion of company loyalty for a very, very long time is no longer the norm with the generation.
Loyal to them, I think loyalty is earned, right?
Absolutely.
I agree with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if the younger generation, they want to be sitting around having a cocktail with their friends and bragging about what they do and how great their job is.
Yeah. I'll give you one kind of anecdote from a recruiting perspective, and maybe Olivia, you can weigh in too. When I first started, I had many hiring managers that I partnered with who would have the attitude with candidates of, you're lucky that I'm interviewing you. They would never say those words, but that was the posture. That was the attitude, right? And the classic, hey, tell me why you should be in this job, right?
Yeah.
You sell me in terms of why I should hire you, right?
Yeah.
And that dynamic has changed and shifted completely. If you are to hold the same posture today to the up and coming workforce that's there, they won't give you
that would put
right?
such a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah. I'm sure you've come across that and seen that. So I think it starts with attitude and posture to understand the differences. Certainly.
I would say
and that's diversity, right?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, at my last position at the staffing firm that I was working at, it definitely, like the hiring managers that we worked with, I didn't work with them directly,
right?
But they definitely had that attitude, like you're lucky that we're, interviewing you, that kind of thing. But I would say in the AEC industry, like we need people so bad, and there is such a labor shortage that like we are so lucky that you're letting us interview you for the position.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that is how it is currently.
It's been flipped up on its head to a large extent. Again, we talked about the pandemic and the shortage of people, right? You were saying, Paul, that you saw this trend 20 years ago. And I agree with you. I saw the same thing.
Mhm.
And there's been a couple of recessions in that time frame, right? There was a recession, back in 2008, 9, right in there. Additionally, around what was it, 2001 or 2002, and both of those had dramatic impacts. The recession of 08 and 09, we lost
Mhm.
1.5 million workers during that period.
Yep.
That's a big number too, right?
It's
That's
not small
dramatic.
potatoes. No, not at all.
Right. So this has been a trend that's been going on for a while. So a lot of people recently wanted to try to blame this on the pandemic exclusively.
Yeah.
And I disagree. I think of course, it had a massive
Maybe
dramatic impact.
accelerated things, or
It
Yeah, it
accelerated,
was the
exactly.
catalyst.
It was an amplifier
Yeah.
of
Mhm.
what was already occurring, and that's what we're up against. So I don't think it's going away. I think
Yeah.
we all know that. And that's the problem, is that these people are up against the ropes trying to find people.
Right.
And getting people. You have to have these things in place, right? Call it an employee retention program, but it's an employee enticement recruitment program. What's going to make you want to come here? And that's where, Paul, you and Olivia, live,
Yeah.
right?
Well, one thing. Sorry, Olivia. I think you were going to say something a minute ago or two.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry,
I was going to talk about Israel's comment that he made, but
Mhm.
I have noticed that there have been a lot of layoffs at a lot of AEC companies lately.
Yeah.
Specifically, I think Bimbox, was it Bimbox or was it somewhere else? Had a huge layoff. Maybe
Bluebeam.
someone in the comments can let me know. Jennifer, were you going to say something?
It was Bluebeam.
Bluebeam. Okay, sorry. Yeah, they had a
Not
huge
Finbox.
layoff.
Finbox is an ATG product. We're still going strong.
Sorry.
Inbox is good.
Foodbox is good. No, yeah, I've noticed that there's been a lot of layoffs. A lot of new people on the job market right now have been laid off. And when I started in this position at ATG, it was all people still working in positions looking for a new one that better suited them. And right now, especially like December, a lot of people got laid off from the industry and are interviewing right now. So I don't know what that means for the future necessarily, but I just wanted to comment that yes, that did happen.
Yeah, no. And that's, there was a question about, the perception of the tech companies laying people off or whatever, and these turnover rates and all that, how do we fear it may trickle down? Well, obviously it's going to have a ripple effect to some extent, and there's nothing you can do essentially initially, but having those conversations and showing them, hey, this is what we offer is going, we're going strong. Talk about the fiscal and financial health, the plan, right? We got lofty goals and we're going here in the next 5 years, let's say. That's gonna that's gonna basically dispel all those myths and rumors, because that's what they are. The industry and our company, wherever you happen to be at, is going to be what you make of, right? And this is what we're doing to make it better and stronger. Talk to your strengths and what you're capable of and what you're doing. It's gonna take the focus off of what Bluebeam or whoever did over here. This is what we do over here, right? I think
advice.
you need to redirect. Yep.
The other thing that your question makes me think about, Israel, is, and I'm no economist, right? So please follow up with other research if you have the time. But my understanding is, even though a lot of the high profile, many thousands of folks, those types of layoffs are happening in a lot of the tech companies, right? That, like you acknowledged there. The tech sector is like 8% of our overall economy, or something along those lines. It's a small piece of that, right? So sometimes what dominates the news is not necessarily a picture of reality, especially when you're talking about AEC, right? To Jeremy's point, a lot of healthy things are happening within construction, AEC more broadly. And so I think to make sure that you've got that data at hand so that you can talk to your employees and your candidates, give them a dose of sort of healthy balance. Yeah, this is happening in these other industries, but here's where we are today. That's important. Yeah, I spend lots of time on LinkedIn too, right?
Yeah.
Israel. So oftentimes that's what clouds my feed. Many of our 300 plus companies that we've worked with at Recruiting Toolbox over the years are tech companies. And so sometimes we get caught up in all the tech news. If you want to take the conversation even further, what you'll probably find is information that says, the last recession, 08, 09, a lot of those same tech companies did not see the kinds of losses that the rest of that, that the rest of the broader economy saw. So this was just bound to happen at some point, right? That's some theory, or some people have theorized that could be the case too. So there's information out there. The point being, tech is really a small piece of the broader pie, and you're in other pieces of the pie.
Yeah. Planning for those conversations, Paul, I think is what you're talking about, right? Having the knowledge of your industry that you're in as a hiring, manager,
Yep.
Is detrimental, right? Being prepared for those hardline conversations, knowing what you're talking about, right? I think we all have an obligation to be as well versed in our industry as we possibly can. And I get emails from the Bureau of Economic Anomalies and all this stuff, and I have for 20 years. And the reason is I want to understand the trends, right? As a hiring manager, as a operations manager, all these things, I want to know what's going to dramatically affect my ability to do my job and to retain or hire employees. And that's really a good way to look at it, Paul. I absolutely endorse what you just said. Is know what you're talking about and talk to. It can be blown up just like anything in the media, right?
Yeah.
Would love to to get other people's, pains that they have or reasons why they would want to leave an organization. I would love to talk about those points if anybody has any insight. Don't see many messages here, so I'll talk about, the impacts of turnover again, as culture, productivity, engagement, and overhead, right? That's why we care about this. Essentially that's the reason for turnover. And I know Paul, Olivia, both of you guys are very talented recruiters. You guys have had great success with these tactics you've used. But at the same time, we're in a unique environment right now with work, labor force shortages, all this stuff. So it's even more important based upon demographics and on the economy to be putting this employee retention program in place. And that really does tie into an employee recruitment program as well, right? That's all I got.
Yeah, I don't know if this is necessarily the place to get too deeply into sourcing tactics and everything else like that from a recruiting perspective. But maybe, Olivia, you and I can just spend a couple of minutes talking about things hiring leaders can do, right?
Yeah.
That are, relatively low lift, but could have great impact. So I'll start with a couple, and then we'll just kind of brainstorm from there, maybe, Olivia. One, right? Israel, you mentioned that you're on LinkedIn all the time. I haven't seen your LinkedIn. I haven't looked yet. But I would say that probably for the majority of us that are on this call, our LinkedIn profiles have changed very little from the time we first signed up for LinkedIn and put our profiles together, which likely means they were set up in a way for us to present ourselves as maybe candidates for other opportunities, for recruiters to find us, right? And say, ooh, Paul looks like a pretty good recruiter. Maybe I should hire him, right? Something along those lines. Well, as hiring leaders, you've got a different responsibility now within your organization. And I think it's a great opportunity to say, all right, let me reframe, let me recast what I'm doing here, and let me talk about the things that I'm doing as a leader of the organization, the kinds of people that I hire. Really position yourself as, this is what it would be like to come and work with me on my team, right? That's a different way to be viewed. Very simple. Probably, take a lunch, right? Take an hour. You could freshen that up. And it'll have a world of a difference in terms of all those potential candidates that are out there considering your jobs, considering maybe interviewing with you, or maybe they're even on a schedule to interview with you. They're going to check you out first and go, what's this person like, right?
Always do that. Like before I meet with a candidate, if I message them on LinkedIn and we have a phone screen set up for the next day, I would say 7 times out of 10, they look at my profile and I see that they're looking at my profile. Like
I would say the same.
They check
after
you
an
out.
interview, they're looking at me.
Yeah, they're looking at you.
Totally.
And they
so
want
why not
to-
use it, right?
Make sure that you have a professional LinkedIn and
Fantastic.
everything
idea.
makes sense.
The other thing that I would do from a recruiting perspective, and then I'll hand the baton over to Olivia, is I would be mindful of, again, those different things that we just talked about that are contributors to people wanting to leave or attractors to people wanting to join certain companies. And that's all tied to obviously the retention side as well. And we at Recruiting Toolbox, we distill it down to a few things, right? People want to experience challenge. They want to have a meaningful impact, right, with what they do. They want to achieve some sort of work-life balance, right? They want to grow and learn, right? These are some of the things that float to the top. We've asked folks, over the years, and these are the things that float to the top. If you are unable to frame your opportunity within those concepts, you're missing you're missing something significant, right? You could significantly change the way your job seekers, the people who are interviewing or phone screening with you, perceive your company. If you can just say, and here's the learning and growth you're going to experience here. Here's what I can provide. Here's what I can't provide. Here's what work-life balance looks like here. Here's the people that we work with. Here's the challenge that you're going to have. Here's the impact that you're going to have, right? So
Yeah,
think
to a
about
certain
those things
extent
that
yourself.
contribute and create your pitch, right? That's really what it is. Be authentic. Be authentic, authentic. Make it real and relevant to the job, but also highlight those concepts that tend to be the sort of trigger concepts for people who are leaving or looking elsewhere. So
Love it.
That's what
Yeah,
I was
no,
gonna
it's,
say, just like be candid in interviews and in phone screens and stuff. I think that's the biggest thing. Just talk to someone just very candidly, like they're your friend. It doesn't have to be so transactional. And I think that's where, sorry, I've gotten most of my success is just speaking to someone like I would a friend and going over everything as plainly as possible and not making false promises. This is the pay that you would expect. This is how much travel you should expect. Just, lay everything out to make sure that it would be a good position for them so that the hiring managers don't necessarily have to go through all of that. I kind of go through it all and they just make sure that that person's a good candidate.
Yep, it really is a sales pitch in a lot of ways, right? You're telling them this is why you would want to work here. And I love the way you kind of express that, Paul. When they're coming in, they're going to want to know why, what's the culture? They're going to want to know all these things. And a lot of times, another tactic I've used in interviews is I'll bring in one of my leads or my employees to say, hey, this gives it some street cred, right? That talk to him, ask him, what, I'm even willing to step out of the room.
Yeah.
You guys have a conversation.
you go get the real
Full
from that
disclosure.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that works. It sells itself in a lot of ways as long as, you're being upfront and honest and genuine. That's a big deal, right?
Sure.
People don't want to be.
That's the biggest
used
deal.
cars. Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that's all I had, guys, unless you had anything else. I think we've had some pretty good engagement here.
Yeah, me too. I
Yeah.
think we touched all the points that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, love it. Again, very, very appreciative of everybody joining us today. Lot of good stuff. And, feel free to reach out, obviously, if you have additional questions, you see our names now. So
All right. Thanks, everybody.
thank you so much, guys. Have a great
Thank
afternoon.
you.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and check out some of the other content on our channel.